The Chengdu J-7E is a top-end Chinese fighter in War Thunder. Let's check out this interesting plane. The J-7 family of jets has its origins in a diplomatic agreement between the Soviet Union and China to transfer MiG-21 technology in 1962 as part of an effort to improve relations. The Chinese received the designs and technical documentation for the MiG-21F, and production began in 1964. Kind of. During the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the aerospace industry had a bit of a hiccup, and mass production of the J-7 fighter was stalled for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was the general unavailability of engines for the new plane. Minor detail, right? Towards the end of the 1970s, design work and production matured and advanced versions of the plane started to appear. There were improvements in avionics systems, radar, weapons, aerodynamics, even somewhat mundane details like the gasket seals used in the fuel valves were improved on. By the mid-1980s, the J-7 family had less than 20% common parts with the MiG-21F it was based off of, and despite the external visual similarities, this is very much its own plane. The J-7 was exported all over the world as a low-cost fighter and entered service as the F-7 with over a dozen operators. What we're looking at now is the J-7E. This was a massive redesign effort, originally called the J-7-4, that's Roman numeral 4, not 7IV, which aimed to produce a dedicated dogfighter version of the plane to counter the growing spread of the American F-16. The J-7E made every possible refinement to improve dogfight performance, up to and including the removal of the search radar to save weight in the nose, and only including a simplistic ranging radar. The most obvious visual difference is the redesigned double delta wing design, which improved on flight performance across the board. Internal differences were significant, with a redesigned cockpit, a completely reworked fuel system, and new metal alloys used in its construction. Now, before I proceed, I need to mention, I've got some technical gripes. Just like with the Q5, Gaijin kind of messed up some of the details on this plane, through a combination of omitting things that might still get added later, and also some minor errors. I'll mention some of that in each section rather than just rattle off a big list, but just keep in mind that there are some issues with this plane. The weapon system of the J-7E is focused on short-range dogfighting. As I mentioned, it only has a simple ranging radar, but in-game it gets a ballistics computer for air-to-ground weapons, which is an error. In real life, the J-7E had almost no air-to-ground capability and didn't include a bombing computer. The loadouts in the game offer a pretty wide variety of missiles, rockets, and bombs, and if the plane had more pylons, the J-7E in-game would be a pretty potent strike fighter. But as it stands, this is a dogfighter. You start off with the basic PL-2 missile, which is a caged seeker weapon comparable to the AIM-9B or the R-3S. Not a great option. Once you graduate to the PL-5B, the plane's potential opens up a bit. The PL-5 is an odd missile. It was originally developed as a semi-active radar weapon, but that project had some issues, and the infrared version ended up being the one chosen for production. Now, using this missile has some quirks. It maneuvers at 20 Gs, which is okay, but the main weakness is that it only has a 4G launch limit. This means that in order to launch the missile, you have to be pulling less than 4 Gs, which can be a bit of a problem in a turn-and-burn dogfight. You can't tell in the footage because you can't see my key presses, but there are usually a number of times anytime I fly this plane where I'm trying to launch a PL-5, but I'm pulling too hard and I have to try and adjust. I really wish Gaijin gave us an on-screen G-meter in the external view, but that's another topic. Anyway, the PL-5B has decent range and a surprisingly heavy warhead. Overall, this is a good missile, even if it's a little odd, and I've been able to score some really surprising hits with this thing. Another technical gripe, the real-life J-7E carried the PL-8 missile, which is not in War Thunder, probably just for game balance reasons, so we might see it added later. Also, this plane has a first-generation helmet-mounted sight, which also isn't represented in the game. Now, the flight performance of the J-7E is quite simply amazing. I need to mention something important. Upgrade your crew. Now, obviously, upgrading your pilot gives a huge advantage in any plane, and I have a video doing a before and after direct comparison, using the J-7E actually. But in this plane, it's doubly important. I'm intentionally including some footage in this review from before and after upgrading my pilot to Ace so that you can see the difference in blacking out and losing control. The J-7E snaps into extremely high G maneuvers instantly and can sustain them without ripping its wings. Doing this with a default pilot is just asking for blackouts. Anyway, the acceleration and engine power are on par with other top-tier fighters. The J-7E actually has a slightly less powerful engine than some of the other advanced MiG-21 derivatives, but it's significantly lighter, which gives it comparable speed and performance. You can punch through Mach 1 down at treetop level with almost no effort, and the rate of climb is strong, the sustained turning performance is amazing, and even considering the crazy 10G or higher maneuvers I pull with this thing, I've yet to rip my wings even once. Just awesome. The only real shortcoming is the lack of combat flaps, but you don't need them. And as long as you aren't slow crawling at landing speeds, the J-7E retains energy very well throughout all of this. Flying this plane out into missions is good clean fun for the whole family. I want to discuss ground attack first, because I know this is going to get a lot of comments. Yes, the J-7E has a ballistics computer, and it's the only Chinese jet to have one so far. That might make you think that this is a natural choice for close air support or ground pounding. And yes, it can do those jobs. The reason why it isn't my pick, and I personally would use the F-5A, is that the quantity of weapons is the issue. With only 4 wing pylons, your strongest ground attack loadout is 2 medium bombs and 2 light bombs, or maybe 4 unguided rocket pods with a relatively low count of rockets. This can be enough if you're okay with needing to go land after only 1 or 2 attack runs, but I personally just prefer a little bit more flexibility, which is why this isn't my pick for ground attack. It can do the job, just not in my personal playstyle. For air combat, that's where the J-7E really shines. Your primary weapon is going to be the PL-5B missile, which feels to me like it works best at medium ranges around 2 to 3 kilometers. The gun, well, you may have noticed that the previous J-7 in the tech tree had 2 guns. For the J-7E, they removed one and replaced it with a fuel tank. So you only have 1 gun with only 60 rounds of ammo. Unless you're a pretty hot sniper, the gun on this thing is almost there just for show. Sure, try to use it, just don't expect to rely on it like you can in, for example, a plane with a gun pod. Anyway, the quirks with the PL-5B mean that a lot of the time you have to angle way ahead of your target while maintaining a lock, stop maneuvering for a second, and fire in that brief 2-second window before you start maneuvering again. It takes practice, and if you struggle at first, don't sweat it. In general, this plane is a wild beast in one-on-one dogfights, and if you manage your speed, very few planes can get the jump on you without pilot error. In furball engagements, periodically dumping countermeasures isn't a bad idea, as I hear people furiously typing in the comments to disagree with that. Because you're whipping around so hard and so quickly, it's almost impossible to know what you're exposing your tailpipe to at any given moment. And if you can prevent an enemy weapons lock, that's 1 less missile you have to dodge while you're fighting multiple opponents already. This plane gets an adequate amount of countermeasures, and honestly, I have rarely run out during regular gameplay. Visually, the J-7E is distinct, and really this is one of my favorite looking aircraft in War Thunder. And honestly, a big part of it is the paint job. You get the Baiyi Feishuing Biaoyan Dui airshow paint scheme, which I just love, as well as a couple other choices which I love less, but are still okay looking. The landing performance is pretty good, better than a regular MiG-21 thanks to the double delta wings. You can drop landing flaps and gear at about 450 kilometers an hour. You also get a drogue chute, which helps reduce the landing run and get you rearming faster. The cockpit... Okay, so another technical gripe. In real life, the J-7E has a redesigned cockpit interior, with two multifunction displays in the mid-center, sort of towards the bottom center of the console, and a radar warning receiver display mounted in a very easily visible position just below and to the right of the heads-up display. In War Thunder, not so much. The in-game cockpit is still good, with great visibility and a useful HUD. I really enjoyed flying this in VR. I just wish the interior was a bit more accurate to the real plane, considering that they've done such a good job on so many other cockpits. To close out the J-7E, this plane has absolutely amazing maneuverability and flight performance, making it a monster in one-on-one dogfights. It's got an adequate supply of countermeasures, and the ability to fly air-to-ground missions if that's your playstyle. However, it doesn't have any radar, and it doesn't have enough ammo for its cannon. Also, its main weapon, the PL-5B missile, has a launch limit of only 4 Gs. The final verdict is that this plane is likely to remain at or near the top of the dogfight meta for quite some time, and if you can accept the limited weapons load, it can fly close air support as well. A great addition to the game that I have a lot of fun with. Yi Ru Zhi Wang, Ganxian Guangkan.